Chapter 41 Consequences. I had to help tell the whole story 3 times. Once to Betty Jean. She made me call mother and daddy when I was done. And after they rushed home, I had to tell them everything again. Then daddy called the police. Sergeant Pike was an older man with silver hair and a beard, and he shook my father's hand like they knew each other. He had kind eyes like grandfather and listened to my whole story without an expression on his face. Well, young lady, he said when I was done, you have gotten yourself into a great deal of trouble, he sighed. I'll pay the Daltons a visit. But if they don't want me to let them search the house, there's not a lot I can do. He turned to Betty Jean. Has the colored girl's family been informed? Betty Jean nodded. She made a bunch of calls while we were waiting for Sergeant Pike to arrive. Good. I'll ask my officers to increase patrols that neighborhood. Can they give me the address? Betty Jean nodded again. My husband is going over and sit up with them tonight. It was the policeman's turn to nod. That's probably a good idea. But Red doesn't know where Liz lives, I said, or what he looks like. He's just blowing off a lot of hot air, isn't he? No one in the room answered, and I realized it wouldn't be that hard if he really wanted to find out. Even though I was at home with my parents and a police officer, I suddenly felt scared. I couldn't go to the rock crusher anymore. I couldn't meet Liz anywhere. The policeman finally left, but dinner was worse than the telling had been. I could barely choke down a piece of pot roast. I had to know what they was going to do to me. Anything would be better than not knowing my punishment. I've called Granny, Daddy said finally. We'll drive you to Pine Bluff tonight. What? I asked. You're going to stay with Judy, your grandmother. No! Marley, I warned you to stay away from Liz. You should have listened. For her sake, if not your own. It's not my fault about the dynamite. No, said Daddy. It's not your fault Red is targeting Liz. If you'd it's your, oops. No, said Daddy. It's your fault Red is targeting Liz. If you'd left her alone like I asked, he would have forgotten all about her by now. The worst part was, maybe he was right. Have you not been paying attention to anything going on in Little Rock? Daddy continued. The FBI came to David's graduation because there were so many threats made against Ernest Green. The FBI. I know it's serious, I said, but there was a knock at the door. I'll get it, said Mother. Daddy and I stood frozen. Why hadn't Mother said anything? Did she want me to go? A minute later, Mother returned with Mrs. Winthrop in tow. Her face was flushed and red as if she had been running. I've been calling all afternoon, she exclaimed. The line was always busy. Miss Winthrop, Daddy started, we've had a stressful day. And I think, so you've heard the news? Miss Winthrop asked. What news? Said Daddy. Mrs. Brewer asked me to tell you personally because... What? She paused, a long, dramatic pause. You've been fired. What? The school board has fired a whole bunch of teachers, 44 people in all, including you. No one said a word. Actually, it was half the school board, and you weren't really fired, but your contract wasn't renewed for next year. Sit down, said Mother, and start from the beginning. Miss Winthrop drank half a pitcher of tea and ate a sandwich. And she filled us in. The school board had been having its normal meeting. They were supposed to rehire all the teachers for the upcoming year. But when it became clear that the board president was going to go through the list one by one and try to fire anyone he thought was supportive of integration, Lamb, Tucker, and Matson walked out of the meeting. Why they do that? I asked. They'd been told by their lawyer that without them there would be no quorum and all the teachers would be automatically rehired. But then after lunch, those still there, McKinley, Rowland, and Laster, declared themselves a quorum and started firing 34 teachers, 7 principals, and 3 secretaries, including Mr. Shelton from Horace Mann and Vice Principal Powell from Central and Principal Wood from Forest Park Elementary and me, said Daddy quietly. And you, Miss Winthrop agreed. Is that legal? Asked Mother. I don't think so, said Miss Winthrop, but they did it, and I don't know who's going to stop them. Before I left, I stood up and asked, Why are they being let go? I knew the answer, of course. Every single person on its supporter of integration, but I wanted to make it them say it. McKinley just cut me off and said there was no time for discussion. Miss Winthrop wiped her mouth. Thanks for the meal. I hadn't eaten all day. The Forest Park PT is meeting tonight at 7 to discuss the firings. I hope you'll all be there. Now, if you'll excuse me. Mother walked her to the door. I sat by Daddy at the table. He looked completely stricken. I'd never seen him so defeated. I'm sorry, Daddy. He shook his head. What are we going to do? We, said Mother firmly, walking back to the kitchen, are going to that meeting. I was president of the Forest Park PTA and I have a few things I want to say. I didn't usually see Mother like this, confident and in charge. It was nice. What about Pine Bluff? I asked. Pine Bluff, said Mother, is going to have to wait. Uh-oh, this mom is about to do something. She was quiet the whole book, but let's see. Chapter 42, Mother's Speech. The Forest Park Auditorium was filled to overflowing when we got there, and it held over 400 people. Mother put her name on the list of speakers while Daddy and I went to find seats. There was a police car out front and an officer in the lobby. There were a lot of people who wanted to speak. I tried to listen, but I had a hard time because next to me, Mother was getting more and more nervous. Most people start to fidget when they're anxious, but Mother gets stiller and stiller until pretty soon it's like sitting next to a statue. I had to do something. Mother, I said. What? Do you remember Dumbo? I knew she did. When I was little, she'd taken me to the film at least 3 times herself. Yes. I pulled a black feather out of my purse. This is a magic feather, I said. When you get up there and feel nervous, rub your fingers across the feather and you'll know what to say. Mother gave me a look. I know it sounds silly, but there was clapping, and then a man on the stage said former PTA President Maureen Nisbet will speak next. Mother held out her hand. Give me the feather. Mother made her way up to the podium and adjusted the microphone. Daddy leaned forward. He seemed as nervous as Mother. I held my breath, but when Mother began to speak, her voice was calm. When the schools were closed last September, I wanted to believe our elected officials were doing what was best for our community. Maybe like me, you sent your child away to go to school, thinking it would be temporary for a few weeks at the most. I didn't want to get involved. Months later, maybe like me, you've become more and more frustrated. As this crisis has dragged on and on, maybe you've begun to question our officials' disregard for court rulings. They're prying into our personal activities. Now, with the firings of 7 principals, 3 secretaries, and 34 teachers, including my own husband, I realize it's no longer enough for me to think these things. I need to say them. Mother looked at me, and I suddenly remembered the WEC flyer we had folded together. Saying what you think is as important as thinking it. Speak out for public schools. Maybe, like me, you're afraid. I know I was when my husband first started to take a stand on these issues. I was worried. Not that he was wrong, but about what others might think. I was afraid the neighbors might call me names. Me, a grown woman concerned about appearances. Or maybe you're a businessman and you're saying to yourself, but if I speak out on this issue, there will be real consequences for me. Not just words. People will boycott my store. I might lose business. I'm not going to pretend that isn't a risk, because it is, but it's time. It's time to take a stand. The risks to our students, to our schools, to our town's reputation are too great if we stand aside and say nothing. It was my younger daughter, who was rather quiet herself, who convinced me of the need to speak out. She left this in my purse. Mother pulled out a piece of pink stationery and held it up. This is from 1 Peter 3:14. But even if you do suffer for righteousness' sake, you will be blessed. Have no fear of them, nor be troubled. For months now I've carried around this quotation. But no matter which way I look at it, I can come to only one conclusion. If my own daughter realizes that we must speak out, how can I do any less? Now, I don't know what Principal Wood's views are on integration. I don't much care. When my daughter wouldn't talk in school, Mrs. Wood was the one who reassured me that Marley would be okay. She saw that Marley was brave and perceptive and smart, and she made me see it too. Mrs. Wood is the best educator I've ever known. And the idea that she would be fired for anything she believes or does on her own time is absolutely ridiculous. Mother stopped talking then. One man started clapping, and then another, and then another, until the whole room was applauding. I glanced over at my father. He was grinning too. And mother, behind the podium, was holding up a tiny black feather. After the speech, brave and perceptive and smart. My mother thought I was brave and perceptive and smart. That's all I could think of. It was a funny feeling. I didn't remember hearing her say that before, but it was really nice. We were almost home, and by the time I realized that no one had said anything about Pine Bluff since Miss Winthrop had shown up at our door, suddenly the nice feelings evaporated, and I couldn't stop wondering if I was going to have to pack my bags when I got home. Daddy, I asked. Yes, Marley. Are you still going to send me away? He didn't answer. Because I'd really like to say, I know I've been disobedient, and you can punish me, but Red, there have been threats before. These notes you got in our newspaper, remember? And the phone calls? You didn't send me away then. Daddy was silent. Marley has a point, said Mother. You didn't even quit that group, and I asked you to. You said it was important to take a stand. And I've been thinking, I went on. Those Negro students who went to Central last year with Judy and David, the Little Rock Nine, they were in danger, but they didn't run away. They were brave. They kept going to school, even though it was scary, even though their parents must have worried about them. They kept going because they believed in something, believed they had a responsibility to make things better, believed that they could make things better, even though they were still just kids. I think I'd like to be them. I held my breath. If you stay, Daddy said, then I knew I'd won. Said, if you stay, I don't want you seeing that girl anymore. But I mean it, Marley. In the past, I would have accepted what he said. At least I wouldn't have said anything, but things were different now. I was taking a stand. I won't meet her in public anymore, I promise. But she is a really good friend, and I'd still like to talk to her on the phone. Daddy didn't say anything. Her parents would have to agree, said Mother finally. I'll give them a call in the morning. All right, agreed Daddy. Sounds fair to me. I didn't say a word the rest of the way home. Too scared he changed his mind. That night, I was just about to turn the light out when I realized there was something I needed to do. Daddy was still in the kitchen talking on the phone. I went to Mother and Daddy's bedroom and knocked on the door. Come in, said Mother. She was sitting on the bed, cold cream on her face, in an old flannel nightgown, reading a book. I'd had a fancy speech rehearsed in my head. When I saw her, all normal and ordinary, it suddenly seemed like too much, and all I said was thank you. I figured, said Mother, if you could work up the courage to tell me the truth about JT, you're brave enough to stay home. Mother held out her arms then, and if I ran into them, and both our eyes filled with tears, I'm not admitting it, because it sounds too darn corny, and it wasn't corny at all. It was nice. For a moment, I got to be 4 again, and my mother was the one who could make everything okay. Chapter 44. Stop this outrageous purge. Excuse me. The next morning, as I gulped down my oatmeal, Mother kept her promise and called to Liz's house. Her mother answered. Mrs. Fullerton, said Mother. This is Miss Nisbet, Marley's mother. Liz's mother talked for a long time. The oatmeal sat like a lump in my stomach as I waited to see what she would say. I know, Mother said finally. We've forbidden Marley from meeting Liz in person too. But to deny them all contact seems to be inviting rebellion, don't you think? Mrs. Fullerton talked for a moment longer. Then finally, Mother handed me the phone. You have 5 minutes. Hi, said Liz when I put the phone to my ear. Hi, I said. Are you okay? Yeah, Daddy and Pastor George sat up all night on the porch, but nothing happened. They got a schedule all worked out for the rest of the month. Sounds scary, I said. Yeah, said Liz. How are you doing? Daddy was going to send me to Pine Bluff to live with Judy, but Mother and I convinced him not to. I can't see you anymore, though. Yeah, me either. Mama made me swear. And if I disobey, I have to go live with Aunt Ida and her 15 cats in Atlanta. 15. A 3x3 magic square adds up to 15 no matter which way you look at it. Up, down, or diagonal. And no matter which way I looked at our situation, I could come to only one conclusion. Are we going to be able to stay friends? I asked. I mean, if we never get to see each other. We can talk on the phone, Liz said. We didn't see each other much anyway. And I remember that while a traditional magic square always adds up to 15, if you use a number twice or leave one out, you can make a square that adds up to something else. You can even make a multiplication square or a square with letters, or it might not look like a regular friendship, but maybe we could find some way to be friends. It won't be forever, said Liz. Maybe someday things will change and we'll be able to meet at the zoo again. Sure, I said. Someday I'll see you by the lions. Things may have been awkward at school since Sally's party. I thought little Jimmy had been on the verge of asking me to the movies. Not that I could go since I was grounded, but he hadn't said a word about it. I thought Sally was going to open up, start really talking to me, but she didn't either. After the crazy night before, I was ready for a nice quiet lunch full of numbers, variables, quadratic equations, and nothing else. But Mr. Harding was out sick, and on my way to the cafeteria, JT cornered me in the hall. Why'd you call the police? He demanded, holding up an arm blocking my way. I ducked under his arm and continued walking. Marley! If he sounded angry, I could have just kept going, but he sounded kind of scared. Brett thinks I did it. Why? I didn't want to take the stuff. We got in a big argument about after you left. Not my problem, I said. Besides, I didn't call the police. That was my father, and I'm glad he did. Now it's over. I started to walk off again, but JT gripped my arm. But that's just the problem, said JT. It isn't over. My father let the police search the whole house, but they didn't find anything. Red had stashed it in the shed, but I guess he moved it, because when the police looked there, it was gone. My fingers and toes suddenly went cold. Daddy had been on the phone with Sergeant Pike the night before, and he didn't say anything when he hung up. I assumed he meant everything was okay. Red still has the dynamite? JT nodded. At Sally's party, the things you said. It did like Liz, before I knew. And while I don't want to go to school with Negroes, I don't want anyone to get hurt. I didn't want that either. I should have followed you into the woods, JT said, but it was Red's idea. JT, I said gently, you're 13. Your brother is not an excuse. It's time you start thinking for yourself. I smiled. I strolled off then. I think I looked all confident, like I was sure it would work out, like I didn't care. But that wasn't true. It was my fault. If I stayed away from Liz, I didn't go to lunch, I might have looked like I thought everything was okay, but I really went to the bathroom and cried.